The waiter is already halfway through the sentence when the laugh happens. Not loud. Not rude. Just enough to bend the air at the table. It's early evening at Romanoff, early 1950s. The room smells like polished wood and cigarette smoke that's been there all afternoon. Linen napkins are folded too precisely. Glassware catches the low amber light. This is a place where people don't lean back in their chairs unless they're sure of their footing. At the corner table, the talent agent is mid-pitch. He's leaning forward, elbows close to his ribs, voice measured, practiced. He's been talking for exactly 90 seconds about a picture that doesn't exist yet, a modest budget, a dependable director, a cast that won't make trouble. His eyes move from face to face, checking reactions the way a man checks exits. Then Sidney Korshak smiles. It's not a grin, it doesn't show teeth. It's the kind of smile that lands softly and stays there like a hand placed on the back of a chair that doesn't belong to you. Korshak tilts his head just slightly as if he's amused by something that hasn't been said out loud yet. He waits. The agent finishes his sentence anyway, people always do. There's a pause, long enough for the ice to shift in a glass, long enough for someone at the next table to glance over and then immediately look away. This table is close enough to be seen, far enough to not be overheard. That's how Romanoff's is designed. Korshak speaks gently, almost kindly. Of course, he says, you'll want to keep this one quiet. That's it. No threat. No warning. No demand. Just a soft joke delivered like a favor. The agent's smile freezes where it is, his mouth stays shaped for agreement but his eyes change. The pitch he's rehearsed all week evaporates. He knows that sentence didn't belong to the conversation, it was placed there. Across the table, Richard F. Walsh hasn't touched his drink. Walsh is still, his hands rest flat on the tablecloth, palms down as if he's anchoring something. He doesn't look at the agent. He doesn't look at Korshak either. He's looking at nothing in particular, which is worse. It means he's listening without participating. Silence stretches. The agent laughs, a reflex. A sound meant to prove he understands humor when he hears it, but the laugh lands wrong, too quick, too thin. He nods once, maybe twice, as if he's already agreeing to something he hasn't been told yet. Of course, he says, his voice is higher than before, naturally. Korshak's smile widens by a fraction. The joke has worked. Here, what makes the moment dangerous? Nobody around the table believes they've just witnessed a decision, but everyone feels it. Something has shifted. A line has been drawn that doesn't exist on paper. Romanoff's keeps humming. Forks touch plates. Somewhere behind the bar, a glass breaks and someone laughs about it. At this table, the air has gone tight. The agent adjusts his tie even though it doesn't need adjusting. He doesn't realize he's already lost control of the meeting. Korshak leans back. He doesn't follow up. He doesn't explain what quiet means. He doesn't have to. Quiet can mean a lot of things in this town. It can mean no press. It can mean no labor noise. It can mean no complaints, no delays, no misunderstandings with unions that can shut down a set without ever saying why. Walsh finally lifts his glass. He takes one sip, sets it back down in the same place. The movement is small, deliberate. It's a punctuation mark. The conversation resumes, but the pitch is over. The agent talks anyway because stopping would be worse. Stopping would mean acknowledging what just happened. He starts naming locations, shooting schedules. He emphasizes how cooperative everyone will be, how smooth the production will run. He says the word smooth twice. Korshak nods along, encouraging, supportive, like a man listening to a good story he's already read. The agent doesn't ask questions anymore. He offers assurances. He promises efficiency. He promises discretion. None of this was requested. That's the point. He's volunteering compliance. Around them, other tables are watching without watching. Romanoff's has always been a room full of people pretending not to see power at work. Everyone here understands that deals don't happen in raised voices. They happen in pauses, in jokes that arrive one sentence too early. The agent feels it now deep in his chest, the sense that something he can't see has just been activated, a phone call he'll never hear, a note he'll never read, a list his name may or may not already be on. He wonders briefly if he should clarify. He doesn't. Clarifying would mean asking what the joke was really about, and asking means you don't already know. In this room, not knowing is the only unforgivable mistake. Korshak checks his watch, an expensive one, subtle but not discreet. He stands smooth and unhurried. "Gentlemen," he says, "always a pleasure." Walsh rises with him, they shake hands with the agent. Firm grips, professional, nothing unusual, but Walsh's eyes meet the agent for the first time. There's no expression there at all, not approval, not warning, just acknowledgement. "We see you." Then they're gone. The agent remains seated for a moment longer than necessary. He exhales through his nose, slow, controlled. He reaches for his drink and realizes his hand is shaking. He steadies it against the tablecloth before lifting the glass. Around him, the room keeps moving. Deals are still being made, careers are still being praised and buried in the same breath. To anyone else, this was a pleasant dinner with influential men. But the agent knows something else happened here. A joke was told. And now there's a condition attached to his future that he can't name, can't refuse, and can't escape. Not because anyone threatened him. Because nobody did. The next morning, the agent wakes up earlier than usual. No alarm. No noise. Just the sudden sense that something is already late. Sunlight cuts through the blinds of his Beverly Hills apartment. He lies still for a moment, listening to the city wake up. Traffic, a delivery truck, somewhere a radio playing softly. Everything sounds normal, which only makes the feeling worse. On the bedside table, the phone hasn't rung. That's the first sign. By 9 o'clock, it still hasn't rung. No calls from the studio, no follow-up, no congratulations for making progress. The picture he pitched last night exists only in his head, and already it feels unstable, like a structure built on sand that someone has just walked around, testing where it might give way. He pours coffee, doesn't drink it, stares at the phone again. At 10:15, the call finally comes. Not from anyone important, a junior associate from an insurance underwriter he's worked with for years. The man's tone is polite, apologetic, almost embarrassed. "There's a question," the associate says. "Just a small one about your next project." The agent listens without interrupting. He already knows this isn't small. The associate explains that some paperwork needs review. Nothing is denied, nothing is approved, it's just paused. Temporarily, the associate keeps saying temporarily, like repeating it will make it true. "Is there a problem?" the agent asks. A pause. "Not exactly," the associate says. "It's more about timing." Timing. The agent thanks him, hangs up, stares at the wall. The joke from Romanoff's comes back to him, intact, unaltered. "You'll want to keep this one quiet." He hadn't realized how many systems that sentence could touch. By noon, 2 more calls arrive, one from a casting office, one from a location coordinator. Both conversations follow the same pattern: friendly voices, vague concerns, sudden hesitations where there used to be certainty. "We just want to be careful," they say. "We don't want complications. Let's circle back." The agent doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't protest. He doesn't mention names, he's careful not to say the wrong thing because he's no longer sure what the wrong thing is. That afternoon, he drives past Romanoff without meaning to. It's habit, a reflex. The valet stand is already busy. Men in tailored suits step out of cars and disappear inside. The building looks the same as it did last night, solid, untouched. He realizes, suddenly, that nothing has to happen there again for the decision to keep working. By the end of the week, the pattern is unmistakable. A grip he promised work to calls confused. A studio assistant mentions offhandedly that a different agent is now handling preliminary conversations. A director stops returning messages, not abruptly, gradually, as if distance itself is the message. There is no memo. No blacklist. No official notice. Just friction. The agent sits in meetings where his suggestions are acknowledged and then ignored. He watches other men get access he used to take for granted. Lunch invitations dry up. When he does get invited, conversations go quiet when he approaches the table. He starts editing himself. He stops pushing projects that might be considered noisy. He avoids scripts with labor complications. He assures everyone constantly that he values cooperation, stability, order. He's doing exactly what the joke asked of him. Late one evening, he runs into a producer he trusts, an old hand, someone who's survived long enough to recognize patterns. They stand near the bar of a different restaurant, less famous, less watched. "Did I do something wrong?" the agent asks quietly. The producer studies him for a moment, then shakes his head. "No," he says, "you did something right." The words don't land as comfort. The producer lowers his voice. "You were reminded," he says, "that's all." Reminded of what? The producer takes a sip of his drink, sets it down carefully, that some conversations don't need to happen twice. That night, the agent lies awake replaying the scene at Romanoff in his head. He notices details he missed before, how Sidney Korshak never specified consequences, how Richard F. Walsh didn't need to speak at all, how the power in the room wasn't exerted, it was acknowledged. That's what terrifies him now. This system doesn't require enforcement, it requires recognition. If you know how it works, you comply without being asked. If you don't, you learn quickly, and if you refuse to learn, you don't get punished, you simply stop being included. Weeks pass. The project quietly dissolves, not cancelled, just postponed until it no longer matters. The agent tells himself this is temporary, he tells others the same, he keeps smiling, keeps showing up. But he's more careful now. He chooses safer clients, quieter ideas. He becomes very good at anticipating which doors will open and which ones won't before he even reaches for the handle. One afternoon, his phone rings again, a familiar number. It's the insurance associate. "Good news," the man says, "things are clearing up." The agent closes his eyes. Nothing has changed on paper, no forms were filed, no appeals made, the only difference is time and silence, enough silence to signal understanding. After the call, the agent realizes something that chills him more than any threat could have. The joke didn't just limit him. It trained him. He is now policing himself on behalf of people who never need to speak to him again. He is carrying their preferences inside his own decision-making. That's the real efficiency of the system. That's why it leaves no fingerprints. That evening, he pours a drink and doesn't bother sitting down. He stands by the window watching the lights of the city flicker on one by one. Somewhere out there, deals are being shaped by sentences that sound harmless, by smiles that linger half a second too long. He thinks about the table at Romanoff's, the untouched drink, the joke that didn't sound like a joke. And for the first time, he wonders how many other careers have been redirected by moments just like that, moments that were never written down, never recorded, and never denied. Because you can't fight a decision that never officially happened. And you can't confront a power that never raised its voice. Months later, the agent sits in a different room at a different table with different people. The chairs are cheaper, the lighting is harsher. The coffee tastes burned. No one here is dangerous, but no one here can help him either. He notices that now, the way power has a temperature, the way certain rooms feel insulated from consequence while others feel exposed. He's still working. Officially, nothing has happened to him. His name is still on doors, his phone still rings, but the calls are smaller, narrower, contained. He's become useful only within certain boundaries. He tells himself he can live with that. Then one afternoon, he hears the joke again. Not the same words, not the same voice, but the same shape. A studio executive, younger, less careful, laughs during a meeting and says, "Let's not make this a whole thing." Everyone chuckles, the meeting moves on. The agent feels his stomach tighten. He watches the faces around the table. No one asks what a whole thing means. They don't need to, they've all learned the same language, the shorthand of restraint, the grammar of silence. In that moment, he understands what really happened at Romanoff. It wasn't a warning. It was an induction. He remembers Sidney Korshak's smile, how it didn't demand agreement, only recognition. How the power in that moment came not from leverage alone, but from the assumption that everyone already knew the rules. He remembers Richard F. Walsh's silence, how authority didn't need to announce itself, how doing nothing could be the loudest act in the room. The agent realizes something else too. If he ever tells this story, it will sound like nothing. No threats. No documents. No names crossed out in red ink. Just a dinner. Just a joke. Just a feeling. He tries once to explain it to someone outside the industry, a relative, a smart man, a practical man. So what actually happened, the man asks. The agent opens his mouth, then closes it. What can he say? That a smile changed the trajectory of his career, that a sentence without consequences carried consequences everywhere, that an absence of force was the force. He shrugs instead. It's complicated. That's the phrase that protects the system, complicated enough to discourage questions, vague enough to deny accountability. Years pass. New faces rise, new tables form. Romanoff's closes eventually, but its role doesn't disappear. It relocates: private rooms, back corners, clubs with different names and the same rules. The agent watches younger men make the same mistakes he almost made. He sees them talk too freely, push too hard, forget where they are. Sometimes he considers intervening, offering guidance. He never does. Because intervention would require articulation, and articulation would mean breaking the spell. The system depends on everyone pretending the rules are natural, not enforced. One evening, much later, he runs into a former colleague, someone who vanished quickly without explanation. The man looks older than his years, careful, guarded. They talk about safe things: weather, traffic, mutual acquaintances. Finally, the colleague asks, "Do you ever think about how it really works?" The agent nods, once. The colleague leans in, lowers his voice. "People think power is about control," he says. "It's not, it's about anticipation." That word lands hard. Anticipation is what the agent learned at Romanoff's: how to predict the unspoken preference, how to comply before being asked, how to shape his own behavior to fit an invisible perimeter. That's why the joke mattered. It taught him where the perimeter was. The colleague finishes his drink, stands. "Good to see you," he says, and means something else entirely. The agent goes home alone. He sits in the dark for a while, replaying his life in small adjustments, the projects he never pushed, the calls he didn't return, the risks he learned to avoid. None of it was forced. That's the most unsettling part. He understands now why the fear in this town is so quiet, why it doesn't leave evidence, why it doesn't need to. The real work happens inside people after the moment has passed. He thinks back to that corner table, the untouched drink, the pause before the joke, the way everyone understood without being told. That moment didn't end when the men stood up and left. It kept going. It moved through phone lines and insurance offices and casting rooms. It settled into habits. It hardened into instincts. It lived on in every decision shaped by what might happen if things got loud. The agent turns off the light. Somewhere, a deal is being made with a smile and a sentence that sounds harmless. Somewhere, someone else will stop smiling and not know exactly why. And the system will continue. Not because it's enforced, but because it's remembered.